Hello, my name is Savannah Brandon, and my informational talk is on the female athlete triad. So Mary Kane was an athlete that signed to Nike at age 17 and experienced loss and suffering from the female athlete triad because she lost her period for 3 years, broke 5 bones, and suffered from depression and psychological damage, all due to this disorder. So raise your hand if you have ever competed in a sport and had poor coaching in your sport and also worried about how your body looks in relation to your athletic performance. Well, this cycle is something that for female athletes can lead and put them at a higher risk for the triad, which is why it is important to educate and inform people about this. So my thesis for this is that there are 3 components of the female athlete triad, and all of which are interconnected, and they lead to one another through these underlying hormone signaling pathways that I will be discussing. And here is my credibility. I did review research from these listed sources here. So my 3 main points are the 3 components of the triad, which are menses, energy availability, and bone health. So menses, or menstruation, is my first point, and this is important for signaling that someone is experiencing the triad because it is the first marker of these underlying hormonal issues that are occurring. So a healthy ovarian cycle looks like this, and you notice there are many peaks and valleys that are high, like very high and very low. And these peaks and valleys are important to this ovarian cycle where the egg matures and the ovarian is released and the corpus luteum forms and is shed. And without these specific hormone spikes, this doesn't occur, which leads us to the anovulatory cycle, which if you notice is flatlined, or the peaks are not as high for estrogen and progesterone, and there's no ovulation, no release of the egg. And this is problematic because if ovulation is not occurring, this is signaling underlying metabolic stress issues, which leads us to the next topic and the next component of the triad, which is energy availability. So in this instance, the body signals through leptin, which is a hormone that shows the body how much energy is available. And when a woman is not is undernourishing themselves for how much physical exercise they're partaking in, this causes lower leptin levels and this can lead to the body thinking it is not able to reproduce due to the lack of energy stores. So this then signals the hypothalamus, which disrupts the HPO axis, which is responsible for releasing these hormones that we saw in the ovarian cycle that control ovulation and also release estrogen in the ovaries. And this lowers estrogen levels when the cycle is disrupted. And by lowering estrogen levels, you lead to problems with our next component and the third and final component, bone health. And estrogen specifically affects bone health because it is an osteoclast inhibitor, and this is responsible for bone breakdown and bone remodeling. So without estrogen inhibiting its activity, bones will become fragile and brittle. And so this is why people that are experiencing secondary amenorrhea, as in this chart here, are shown to have 12.9 times greater risk of stress fracture compared to just low bone mineral density and to just a low ideal to actual body weight ratio. And the reason that bone health and bone disruption is so important, especially for young female athletes, is because active growth of the bone is occurring at age between 10 to 20 is whenever it spikes. And that is when the most important bone formation is happening. In fact, 92% of a female's bone mineral content is achieved by the age of 18. So these young athletes are especially at risk for long-term damages if they're experiencing the triad. So in conclusion, I have explained how in menstruation, the lack of menstruation is signaling these underlying hormonal components, which leads to the energy availability aspect, where there is not enough nutritional intake to fit the physical exertion needs. And this leads to the HPO axis disruption, which in turn leads to lower estrogen levels, as discussed with how this affects bone health and bone mineral density. And so overall, I have explained how these three components are interconnected and through these underlying hormonal pathways. And this topic is really important because there are 3.5 million female high school athletes competing in sports who need to be educated about this so that they don't experience long-term effects and damages of this disorder. Thank you so much.